Hey everybody, Professor Steins here. Today we're going to go over WordPress, which is a PHP MySQL application that can be used to create websites, blogs, and can really be extended to a lot of other things as well. So to get started, what you're going to want to do is come out to wordpress.org and go ahead and click on Download WordPress. This will give you a zip file of the source code that we're going to need to set it up. The website itself is also laid out really well good as well. There's very good documentation at the codex for installing WordPress or even just kind of using it and all kinds of different stuff that's out here. So if there was a book to be had about WordPress, I would just suggest coming out to the codex and codex.wordpress.org, and this will be a really good guide to getting started with WordPress and stuff like that. But we're going to walk through it in the videos as well and how to get started with it. So you should have it downloaded by now. You're going to want to extract it into a folder, kind of like what I've done here. And it'll have kind of a WordPress folder in it with all the PHP files. We're going to talk a little bit about how the PHP works and stuff, but you shouldn't have to write any PHP. So if you've never done PHP before, that's fine. The other good part about it is there is a lot of good documentation that's available in the code itself. So, a little README file that talks about migrations and recommendations and all kinds of other good resources to check out. Once you have the source code, you're going to want to open up your XAMPP panel that we got started in previous videos. So Apache and MySQL, you're going to want to have these two services running, and you're going to want to be able to come out to localhost and make sure that you can pull up the dashboard. You should just be able to type in localhost and hit enter and get to this screen. So this is the source code files. That's my text editor in case we need it. And it looks like I actually had it open twice, but this one will do. We're going to go back to our XAMPP panel and just click on the Explorer icon. If you don't have the folder open for XAMPP already, that'll open it up. And in the htdocs folder, hypertext documents, we're going to want to come in here and create us a new folder that we can use to host our application. So right click, create a new folder, and let's rename the folder to your last name and Word. This way this will become part of our URL, and we'll be able to I'll be able to see it in your lab documentation when you type it in, like well, that's not there yet. When you type it in here. Right now we don't have anything here, but all we got to do is just move our files from where we downloaded them from WordPress, and I'm just going to Control C to copy and Control V to paste, and that might take a minute. Kind of a lot of files in there. So we should be done with that folder, and we'll leave htdocs open and go into here just in case. And once this completes, we should be able to go back to our browser, just hit refresh, and pull it up again. So this time, hopefully what we'll get is the install folder on how to install WordPress. It's important to kind of keep link where you're at up here, wp admin setup config. So if we're kind of looking at our folder inside of XAMPP, that's kind of where we're at right now. We are down here on the setup config page. So we should just be able to hit English and hit continue. And this is the part where we're going to have to do a little bit of extra steps to get things going. And that is to create a database. So if we go back to our local host, to the XAMPP dashboard, up at the top right there'll be a link for phpMyAdmin, and we can open that up and see the database, our MySQL database that's on XAMPP. That's MySQL. And the first thing we're going to do is create a new database. So over on the left hand side for new, we'll create a new database, and we'll call it our last name Word DB. That way we'll know that it's the database. We'll hit create. And it should come up over here on the left, and there'll be no tables found or anything like that. We don't have to go any further. The install for WordPress is going to do the part of creating all the tables for us. What we are going to have to do though is create a user account. So up at the top under server, we'll need to go to user accounts and add a new user account. And we'll make this Stein's Word user. That'll be our username. And the host, we're going to limit that to the local host account, the local host host. And password, we'll just leave it as something really extremely weak, password, and we'll probably have to type it in twice here. And let's see, scroll down. I don't think I typed that the same way. I'm just typing in password, all lowercase. We're on our local network, so nothing to really worry about here. In a real environment, you definitely want to use a stronger password than password. We don't really want to create another database, and we don't want to do global privileges or anything. So we'll just hit go for right now. This will just create the user account, and the SQL statement up here is going to execute to do that. Now that we've done that, though, we do have the user account. We can click on user account so we can see me there, Stein's Word user. We can go to edit privileges. It will kind of take us back to a similar screen. Just click on databases up here at the top. We don't want to give them global rights, just specific to our database, Stein's Word DB. And click go. And we'll just check all to give them all the rights, because why not? Why not give this user all the rights to this particular database? WordPress is going to need some things in here, specifically in the structure for dropping or creating tables. It kind of does some of that stuff automatically, so you are going to have to give them at least some rights in structure other than just the basic CRUD operations. But for our purposes, we can just click all and click OK, and that's going to do pretty well for us. We can double check by going to Stein's Word DB and privileges up here at the top, and we should see the root user account because they can go anywhere, and then our database specific account that we just gave it. So if you got through all that, and we should be good to go with the next screen here. So we've created the database, we've got a username and password to host, and we know what we're going to use with our table prefix. We're probably just going to take the default. So let's go. And we'll need to change the information here to match what we did in PHP My Admin just now. So the database name is going to be Stein's Word DB. The username is going to be Stein's Word user. Password is just password, all lowercase. The database host is the local host account, and WP _ for the table prefix. Now, if you had to go and change your port number for MySQL to get XAMPP to work to like 3307, you might need to add :3307 here to point to the new port, the specific port. But this should work otherwise. We'll click submit, and if it looks like you get to here and it says all right Sparky, then you're good to go. If not, you might have to check that you matched up all the names that you used in your database and the password and all that kind of stuff. So we're getting through the install. I guess this is when the 5-minute timer starts counting. Site title, I'm just going to put Stein's in as the first name, and we'll call this iTech 4366, which is our advanced web class. I would suggest keeping this information simple, so username is just going to be admin, and it'll actually auto-generate a password for you, but I'm just going to change that to password, all lowercase. That way we don't forget what passwords you're using for different accounts. We'll tell them, that's fine, confirm password, that's fine. You can put an email address here. It's not going to matter for our purposes, simply because we're not going to have a email server set up to communicate with. So if you did put this on a real system and configured your SMTP settings, you would get emails from WordPress about possibly people logging in or different events. You can get really granular in how you receive notifications about your WordPress blog. Again, for us, it's not going to help a whole lot because we don't have an email server, but in the future it would. If you check the box here for search engine visibility, it's going to create a robots.txt file that's basically going to say don't index the site, and really discourages, that's the only way to put it. You can't actually stop them. They can still get it if they want it, but for the reputable search engines like Google, they'll try to drop it out of the listings and stuff. So everything should look good. We'll go ahead and click OK and let it finish doing its install deal. You should get that it's good to go. Username and the password that you chose. And that should get you back to sort of a login page. But before we go there, let's take a look at the WP admin folder, the files that got created for us here. That way we can kind of see what's going on, what is in these PHP files that makes WordPress work. We got through a whole lot with our application and didn't even need to write any code. So the first part that you might want to come look for is the WP config file, and this one is going to show the connection settings to your database, along with some other stuff. The cool thing about WordPress is it does come with a whole lot of comments, so there's going to be a lot of information in here to tell you what these different settings are doing. For example, we're setting constants here for the database name, the user account that's going to get logged in with, the password that we set. This is the information we set up in PHP My Admin. Use a local host account, or focusing on using a specific character set. If you're really interested in how does all the security work, this would be a good place to start looking at too. Is that it kind of generated some salt keys for us, but you might want to go out and create your own salt keys, or something like that. So table prefix, that setting is there, and debug. Another file that looks interesting down here that we might want to take a look at is wp settings.php, because this file, the config file, is also including the settings file. So let's go back to the Stein's Word and look down at the WP settings file and kind of open that up and take a look at it. And it's going to define a lot of constants and different settings for WordPress itself. Again, comments are really good, so comment variables, include directories, class names, stuff like that is what this file is going to be about. For example, WP includes, kind of defining a constant there. Version, different ways to call functions that are kind of available in WordPress. Load the early WordPress files. Multi-site is another really cool option in WordPress, and maybe we'll get to touch on a little bit of it there, but there's also some checking here to see if it is a multi-site install and doing some additional settings if that's the case. Loads most of WordPress, so these are going to be all of the accompanying files that help make the application work. And a lot of other good information. We don't really have to know it all, just know that when we come to look for it, this might be where we want to go to start looking, kind of make some setting changes. Another file that's really interesting in that respect is in the WP includes folder. There is a default file. Let's scroll down a little bit. Default constants. So if you open this one up and take a look, WP includes default constants. There'll be a lot of different settings in here if you might need to make a change in the future. For example, we're not going to change the size of what a terabyte is, but if we come down and start taking a look and trying to figure out what changes we might need to make. For example, these would be some good examples. We're pulling the WP content folder, plugins folder, and plugins folder. Sounds funny, but it's kind of in there twice. If we look back at our regular Stein's Word, these two folders here, WP content and WP content and the plugins folder that's inside of it. There's probably some other ones in here for themes as well. If we kind of scroll down or scroll up, it's just pulling the same one. I think there'd be themes in there. Anyway, WP content folder is where a lot of the setup and design and what makes your blog you is going to be here. So uploads are going to be all the files that you kind of stick in there, and there isn't anything that we put in uploads yet. There's a theme folder, and we'll get to talk about themes in a little bit. Same with plugins. There'll be a plugins folder, and we'll talk about those a little bit later as well. WP includes tends to be a lot of the WordPress application itself, and the WP admin folder is pretty much the admin interface, which we're about to jump into right now. So if you ever need to go in and start kind of making some changes, good place to kind of do that. There's also a sample file here. This will kind of like be a blank WP config. So if you kind of don't need to use the auto installer and just want to put your own info in, you could do that just by kind of doing this and then renaming that file to WP config. WP config won't exist when you first download the code. So if we go back and look at the original WordPress, there was only the sample file, and the WP config file got written out during the install. Anyway, like I said, there's a lot of good settings if you want to kind of come in and take a look, and usually it's commented pretty well, not all of it. That's a pretty huge block of code there for using a regular expression. Again, for the most part, you shouldn't need to know a whole lot of PHP. Just that that's what we're dealing with here. So back to our localhost Steinsword WP login page. This will be our nice little WordPress install, so you can just log in with the username and password we created, admin and password, and log into it. So this is the original. This will kind of be the first place that you come to, and this is called the dashboard. There's a spot here in the middle that you can kind of make it dismiss, although I typically leave it up just because it usually kind of gets me to some links that I might need to get into really quick to make a change, instead of trying to go in through down here or something like that. We'll talk more about parents probably next week. This week, again, is just kind of the setup and install and kind of how to get started with it. So we've got it installed. We're on the dashboard. A good place to start would be down here in settings, since we are talking about settings. And this could be where you make some other changes. So if you wanted to change your site title, you weren't happy with the first thing that you chose, you could change it here. You could change the tagline instead of just another WordPress site to be something else. If you were moving this from domain to domain, we're using localhost right now, but you could presume that localhost will just get replaced with whatever domain address you use. And if you were running at the root address instead of localhost is the dashboard for XAMPP. But you could also just kind of get rid of Steinsword and just run it from your domain address. And you might have to make that change, that setting twice. You could change the big administrator's email address. So if you wanted to change this to something like do not reply, that might not be a good idea because it does send admin emails. So you might want to leave it as someone's address or maybe some distribution group or something like that. Membership will allow self-registering users. It's turned off by default, but if you want people to create accounts and kind of participate in your blog, you could enable that option here and also set what their default rights should be. We'll talk a little bit more about users and what their roles will be, but subscriber is basically the lowest account access. They'll pretty much just be able to log in and maybe leave feedback. A contributor and author will have a little bit more rights into creating articles or blogs, and may have like some escalation in there where like a contributor maybe start a page but can't make it public. An editor or an administrator maybe would be able to publish it live, or an author might be able to publish it live. So different ways to gate access to WordPress and what your users can do. Probably just want to leave it at subscriber. That way they have the least amount of privilege. You could change it to time zone offset. I think we're like -5 or something in US, but it shouldn't be an issue here. Just for what we need to do it. There is some timestamp based stuff in here, so it is good to kind of set this early to what you know is the right thing, which I don't really know what it is for us, but sure, why not? 207, that does not seem right. I think we're +5. Oh, there's a list up here. I can just choose Americas, United States, New York. Yeah, because we're Eastern time zone. You could change your default date format here, so ISO 8601 format is what I prefer, year, month, day, instead of using that one. You could also change the timestamp, military time if you want to do that here, or something special, milliseconds or something, who knows, and which day of the week it starts on. So a good place to come in and make some changes. I'm not going to change this yet, so we can just see where that shows up when the time comes. Underneath writing, that's going to make more sense when we start talking about posts. Right now there's no categories defined, so it's just choosing the default uncategorized post. But we'll be able to come back and change this in the future to whatever it is you decide that you want to organize your posts by. Standard post format is fine unless you want to do something kind of special. And there are options to where you can set up an email account that you just send an email to that email account, and then the email gets kind of auto-translated into a post. That can exist, but you need to configure it. This place is also pretty cool too, pingomatic.com. It's kind of like a search engine optimization thing where when you go and make changes to your blog and want to see it in real time, it'll kind of do that for you whenever you make posts to your page. So shouldn't have to make any settings here yet. Might want to come back and do the post category in the future. Now the readings tab over here on the left, you can change how you want your page to be set up. You want it to be more like a blog where your home page is a list of the latest posts that you created, or would you rather it be more like a static web page, like just a typical kind of homepage? We're just going to say your latest posts for right now, because that's kind of the default. You could change some other things in here too, like just using summary instead of full text. That is defined as a separate field, so that's a little bit more writing to do that. And if you needed to make that change about search engines, you could do that here. Discussion tab is really going to talk about how people can comment and do feedback on your articles and blog posts and stuff. By default, most of this stuff is turned on, which if you're just using WordPress as a website, you might not need, because you don't really want someone to be posting, you post your HR policies or something, and someone writes back feedback underneath it like, I'm not abiding by this or something. So in particular, this one right here, allow people to post comments on new articles. If you really don't want to have your website be comment driven or user driven, you just want to use it to create your website and you don't really want a lot of interaction. Maybe you want to do all your interaction on Facebook or something instead of through your blog. You might just want to go ahead and just uncheck that box right there. That way, people are not allowed to post on new articles and stuff. There'll be some other things that we'll look at where maybe this stuff still shows up, and you got to be careful. But yeah, that's a good option to mark off right at the beginning. You could add some other stuff in here too. Like filling out name and email. At least they're not anonymous. If you wanted anonymous feedback, you could uncheck that box and just anybody can post. You got to be careful though. Spammers do exist, and they do find these WordPress blogs, and you might get inundated with spam. We're going to talk about that in a second, just because In the plugins folder, if you haven't noticed, there's a little, at least for mine, it might not be there for you, there's an outdated plugin in here that we probably need to update. And that's actually going to relate back to different types of spam settings. And that's kind of what we're looking at here, different ways to help moderate feedback on your blog. So email me whenever, that way you're automatically notified when someone posts something. You can moderate in real time. You could kind of hold it back for a little bit. It must be manually approved. That might work well if it is kind of something you do want feedback on, but only positive feedback. You want to make sure it's okay before it goes live to the world. You can turn that on. You can also create lists here of words. So if you find some spam that's showing up in your comments that to certain products or websites or something like that, you could kind of create a match here for things that might be held for moderation or that might just be blacklisted completely. So if you find somebody that's just posting content that you don't want to use, or swear words might be a good example, is that it'll just block that comment completely. The avatars thing down here and rating and stuff like that. Unfortunately, the default avatar setup that comes with WordPress is based on something else called I think it's called Gravatar or something. And we'll take a little look at that real quick. Okay, we're going to come back to media, but since we're talking about the avatar thing, if you wanted to change your profile up here at the top right and edit my profile, you could make some changes in here that you wanted to, such as maybe you wanted to use a different theme. You didn't like the default theme. You could change that here. But down here about your avatar, here's the link that I was talking about, is that it doesn't just let you do a picture. It's kind of got to, create your own thing in WordPress, and it's kind of like a little authentication thing too, I guess, just to make sure it's kind of a real person or something. So typically I just turn off the Gravatar thing because most of our users aren't going to do that. They're not going to go create a separate account for something. So I just usually just turn the avatars off. There's other ways that we could kind of change that if we needed to. Underneath media, if you wanted to kind of create some default things here about when images get uploaded, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Different permalinks. Now this is kind of important when it comes to things like search engine optimization, in that by default it's going to kind of put in the date in which you made the post. The plain one here doesn't really help us with search engines. This one really does help us with search engines, but if it's not something that we want to timestamp, we might want to just go and use something else, just use like the post name or something, and not really the date. Some different options, and then you could do kind of a custom structure using this format down here. I'm going to leave it on the default with the date though. Let's see, changes, and then the very last thing down here is privacy, and this is kind of a new thing just because of all the buzz and changes that are happening over in the EU right now with privacy policy and disclosure of what things are being used for. So by default now, WordPress comes with a privacy page that is sort of already started up for you, and you could change it if you wanted to, but it's already kind of set to use that page, and it's already got some content in it. So let's actually take a view, and there's a couple ways that we could get there. Let's see, Permalinks. I'm supposed to use that. There's a couple ways that we could get to that privacy policy page. So you could get through here, and here. One way might also be to come up here to the top, and this is kind of like our little drop down. You could go to Visit Site, and this will actually pull up the home page, what it looks like for you, So by default, this is what WordPress looks like out of the box with not a lot of changes. It didn't actually get us to our privacy page, did it? So over on the left-hand menu, we have posts, media, and pages, and we'll cover those probably this week. Talk more about appearance and plugins next week, and then users and some other stuff that we can do, maybe MU setup there at the very end. So for right now, under pages, that's where you'll find your privacy policy. I guess it's just a draft right now, which might be why we didn't see it out there on the live web. So it's there. We could kind of take a look at it to open it up. And here's the little editor. It's got a little guide for helping you kind of figure out what you want to say in it. And then by default, it comes with some information already in it. But of course, you'll probably want to come back and make some changes in the future. For example, stuff down here has no info in it. So you might need to come in and add some more info down here to fulfill your obligations. Disclose what you're using your thing for. Here's a little sample page. This is a sample page. Probably don't want to use this. It's just kind of there for by default. It wasn't actually kind of in the menu or anything, I don't think. Just kind of a post. Get back to your site admin from here as well. Let's see, dashboard, pages. So let's trash that one and delete it. A little trash thing there. Let's add a new page, and we'll call this home page, or my home page, or we can kind of give it the same name as the title, I guess. Welcome to 42 iTech 4366 Advanced Web Dev, where we're creating websites of very large sizes. Kind of neat how that little thing went off to the side there. Kind of lets you focus a little bit more on the writing view there. Let's see, some options. Let's just hit publish. Go ahead and publish it live. There are some options here, such as featured image and some other things that might be kind of neat for you to play around with. For example, I do have a lot of pictures that I use on the backgrounds back there. So if I'm kind of feeling that this is going to be a space, some space stuff in it, we might be able to just kind of drag some files and stick them right in, like so. You're going to probably want to make some changes over here for the title, and particularly the alt text. That way the picture can be described to somebody with handicap accessibility issues. You can also provide descriptions. Keep in mind that all of this information is also kind of part of search engine optimization. So the more text, the more concepts that you can apply through a lot of these fields are going to help boost your ratings and stuff. So we can choose which image we like best. I'm kind of thinking purple image looks pretty good, so we'll choose that as our featured image on that page. We could change the order of it and other stuff like that. An option up here at the top is screen options. Will actually give you some extra abilities to create things. So if we want to turn on discussion, comments, slug, and author, I'm going to leave custom fields off. If we want to turn off that little fancy fly in and fly out, we could turn that off there. If we scroll down, we'll have some new options in here, such as discussion and comment tracking and stuff like that. So if we turned it off for the entire site like we did before, but we did want to allow comments on this particular one, we could add those here instead of them being enabled by default. Slug, we could change that, or if we wanted to change who wrote this article, we could do that as well. Or comment on it. So we'll go back down to settings. We didn't do it the first time under reading, but we'll set this to be our welcome to iTech 3266 Advanced Web Development, and leave post page off for right now. Alright, so we'll go back and take a look at Visit Site. Didn't actually create that, did it? Oh, I think I know what we wanted to do here. Well, we'll deal with themes more next week. In the meantime, we could just kind of come in and create more pages. You know, just fill it out. Try to make maybe 5 or 6 posts over here. We kind of got our Hello World post. Good place to get started, though, instead of kind of dealing with the post directly, is just go into categories, and that's where we'll find our uncategorized one. Now, you can't really delete that one, but you can go in here and create new ones. So if we want to talk about HTML, and no parent category, or maybe we'll do a parent category of web development, and we'll call it slug for it would be web dev. No parent category, we could put a description in, click OK. Let's create one for HTML under web development, and we'll create one for CSS under web development. You know, just creating a few. You know, I don't have to go crazy here. Just trying to demonstrate some concepts. Let's create us a new category for cybersecurity. It's kind of the two things I'm interested in right now: web development and cybersecurity. So we'll say none, and sockets. Seemingly have a lot of fun using Python and sockets to illustrate cyber principles. Virtual machines, it comes into a big thing in cybersecurity as well. Definitely having access and knowledge on how to use virtual machines for cybersecurity. And that'll probably be pretty good for us right now. Just kind of get started going back to posts. And now we can either kind of trash this post, create us a new one. It's, you know, kind of like intro to web dev, or found a cool thing. So what you might notice is that posts and pages tend to do some fairly similar things, right? Let's go back and make a posts page as well. Posts. Publish. And then we'll go back to settings, reading, and make sure we set this to be posts. Yeah, okay. So we'll go back and visit site again. And if you don't like WordPress default, that's fine. We're going to end up making some changes in a little bit. Important part is to really just kind of get some post pages up and going. If you really want to, we could go into menus, or really the better way instead of doing this would be go back to the dashboard and just hit the customize website. So that's going to kind of open up a writer a little bit like this, where you could go in and make some of those changes we had before. So you could see that, you know, just another website was here, and really could just kind of go in and say one line of code at a time, or let's do our Yoda line. Do not. There is no try. Yoda. Now you can turn it off if you wanted to. Could be a way to change our image here. So we currently have that header image. You know, we could change that if we wanted to. Current header, add new image. We'll change it to our space one. That's pretty easy. Hit publish. Go back. This is kind of where I was thinking with menus. Is there's different menu locations, and we didn't create any menus yet. And that's really, I think, where we're gonna probably go next week. Start creating our menus out. See how they can get work. You can kind of try to do that yourself if you really want to. Set a social links menu or something like that and put it down at the bottom. That might be pretty neat. A lot of options in there. So for this week, try to get a little familiar with the media tool, upload some stuff, and see if you can kind of embed it in a page or something like that. Again, that's kind of our home page. If we really wanted to stick that other picture in there, we probably could. Add media. I'll put our other space picture in there. That way it can go up live. Large as in galaxy. Anyway, the video's probably gotten very long, a lot longer than I probably intended it to be. So if you have any questions, feel free to post in the course. Experiment around a little bit, get some pages and posts going a little bit. Then we're going to really kind of go in and look at themes next week. We can kind of add new themes and go look for new themes. There's only a few that kind of come in by default. But you can go out and find a whole lot of different themes out there and try to give them a shot. And we'll cover a little bit more about how all that stuff works next week. So, if you have any questions, feel free to post. Have a good one. Bye.